Welcome back to the deep dive. I am so excited for this one. We are diving deep into Mel Robbins' The Let Them Theory. I know a lot of you are already familiar with her work, especially the 5-second rule, but in this book, she takes things to a whole new level, focusing on the transformative power of letting go.
Yeah, it really builds on that idea. The let them theory is all about how releasing the need to control everything and everyone around us can dramatically improve our relationships and our overall well-being.
So it's about accepting what is, rather than constantly trying to force things to be different.
Precisely. And the book is packed with relatable stories, practical techniques, and, just a lot of really great advice for how to put this theory into practice. It's divided into 20 chapters across 4 sections.
Okay, so for those who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, what's the core message here? What's Mel Robbins trying to tell us with the Let Them theory?
I think at its heart, the let them theory is a roadmap for reclaiming our power, but not in the traditional sense. It's not about power over others. It's about the power that comes from choosing acceptance over resistance.
Okay, I like that. Acceptance over resistance. So where does this whole let them idea come from? How did Mel Robbins even come up with this theory?
Well, she starts the book by sharing her own journey, which I think makes it so incredibly relatable.
I'm always curious to hear the backstory. Like, what led her to this idea?
She was going through a really tough time, battling anxiety, facing some serious financial struggles, experiencing some challenges in her marriage. She was basically at rock bottom.
Wow, so she was really in a dark place.
Yeah, and that's when she discovered the 5-second rule.
Right, that was her big breakthrough.
Exactly. But the 5-second rule, that was just the beginning. The let them philosophy came later, and it was actually sparked by, get this, a hilarious incident at her son's prom.
Oh, I love a good prom story. Okay, so set the scene. What happened?
Picture this. Torrential downpour, no dinner reservations, a bunch of stressed out parents running around trying to salvage the night.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Was, or at least it seemed that way to Mel. But her son, Oak, he was completely unfazed.
Really, he was just chilling amidst all the chaos.
Totally chill. And that's when it hit Mel, like a lightning bolt. She was the one creating her own stress by trying to control things she couldn't. But Oak, he was the living embodiment of let them. He was just accepting the situation as it was and going with the flow.
That's amazing. I love that. So let them is about recognizing that we can't control other people's thoughts, actions, or feelings.
Absolutely. It's about surrendering to the reality of the situation and focusing on what we can control, which is our own reactions.
Okay, so we let go of the need to control everything and everyone around us. What happens then? What's the benefit of this let them approach?
Mel uses a brilliant analogy to illustrate this. She compares it to a seesaw. When we try to control others, it's like pushing down on one side of the seesaw. We might momentarily gain the upper hand, but we also create an imbalance that ultimately makes us feel powerless and exhausted.
I love that analogy. It's so visual, and it makes so much sense. I mean, we've all been there, right? When we try to force someone to change or to do something our way, it usually just creates more tension and resistance.
It really does. It's a recipe for frustration. But when we let go of the need to control, we create space for something much more powerful to emerge. Acceptance. And with acceptance comes peace, clarity, and a sense of liberation.
Okay, so how does this let them concept play out in real life? I mean, it sounds great in theory, but I'm curious how it actually applies to, say, our relationships.
That's where the book gets really interesting. Mel dives deep into how let them can transform our interactions with friends, family members, romantic partners, colleagues, really anyone we come into contact with.
And she starts with friendships, right? In chapter 11, she talks about the truth no one told you about adult friendship.
Exactly. She tackles this really relatable issue of, how friendships evolve and sometimes fade as we get older.
Oh, I definitely need to hear about this. Adult friendships could be so tricky. Everyone's busy, lives change, and it's easy to feel like you're losing touch with people you were once close to.
Mel calls this the great scattering, this phenomenon where adult friendships naturally shift and evolve as we navigate different life stages. Our priorities change, our schedules get packed, and those shared experiences that once bonded us, well, they become less frequent.
Okay, so how do we deal with this? Do we just accept that friendships are destined to fade as we get older?
Mel doesn't think so. While she acknowledges the natural ebb and flow of friendships, she also emphasizes that we can create fulfilling and lasting connections even amidst the chaos of adult life. But it requires a shift in perspective.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. What kind of shift?
It's about releasing the expectation that friendships will remain static. We have to let go of that. It's about accepting that people change, Lives evolve, and friendships will naturally transform as well. And sometimes it's about letting go of friendships that no longer serve us.
That's interesting. Holding on to friendships that have become one-sided or draining can actually prevent us from making space for new, more fulfilling connections.
Exactly. And that brings us to Chapter 12, Why Some Friendships Naturally Fade. Mel dives deep into the dynamics of those friendships that leave us feeling depleted, where we're constantly the ones reaching out, initiating plans, and putting in all the effort.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced those one-sided friendships. It can be really hurtful, especially when you feel like you're giving more than you're receiving.
It's natural to feel that way. But Mel encourages us to view these fading friendships not as personal rejections, but as opportunities for growth.
So it's not about taking it personally. It's about recognizing when a friendship has run its course.
Yes, and then choosing to invest our energy elsewhere.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about prioritizing relationships that feel mutually supportive and fulfilling.
That's it. And in Chapter 13, How to Create the Best Friendships of Your Life, Mel offers some really practical advice on how to cultivate those meaningful connections, even when it feels like everyone's already got their own friend groups.
That's the thing. Building new friendships as an adult can feel so daunting.
It can. It's definitely not as simple as it was in school. But Mel emphasizes that it's not about waiting for friendships to just magically appear. It's about taking proactive steps to create opportunities for connection.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
Well, she shares this great story about moving to a new town in her 50s, knowing absolutely no one. She talks about how she spent most of her time holed up in her house, feeling isolated and lonely.
Wow, I can only imagine how tough that must have been.
It was. And it was actually her daughters who gave her a much-needed push. They encouraged her to, just start saying hello to people at the coffee shop, to strike up conversations with strangers at the park. And you know what? It worked.
That's so encouraging. It shows that sometimes all it takes is a little bit of courage and a willingness to step outside of our comfort zone.
Exactly. And that's one of the things Mel highlights throughout the book, this idea of going first.
Going first, what does that mean exactly?
It means, don't wait for others to reach out to you. Be the one to initiate conversations, invite people to coffee, propose activities.
That's good advice. I think a lot of us, myself included, tend to wait for others to make the first move.
It's a natural tendency for sure, but taking that initiative can really pay off.
Okay, so be proactive and don't be afraid to initiate. But what about those awkward moments when you're first getting to know someone? Meeting new people can be so nerve-wracking.
Mel suggests something that I think is super helpful. She says, adopt a let me mentality.
A let me mentality. Okay, explain.
It's let me be the one to break the ice. Let me be the one to ask questions and show genuine interest in others.
I like that. Let me create that social scaffolding. It shifts the focus away from your own insecurities and towards a genuine desire to connect with others.
Exactly. And when we approach social interactions with more ease and authenticity, it takes the pressure off and allows for a much more genuine connection to form.
Okay, that's great advice for building friendships. But what about those times when we're not trying to build new relationships, but rather trying to change existing ones? Have you ever noticed how often we try to change the people around us?
Oh, all the time. It's like a universal human urge, right? We want our partners to be tidier. We want our kids to be more motivated. We want our friends to, just make different choices.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking we know what's best for everyone.
And that's where let them becomes crucial for navigating relationships. Because the truth is, we can't force people to change, no matter how much we might want to.
It's so true, and I've learned that the hard way. The more I push, the more resistance I encounter. It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
It's the perfect analogy. And in Chapter 14, People Only Change When They Feel Like It, Mel breaks down the science of motivation and explains why pressure and ultimatums rarely lead to lasting change.
Okay, spill the beans. Why is it that our attempts to fix people so often backfire?
It all boils down to control. As humans, we have this innate need for autonomy. So when we feel like our freedom of choice is being threatened, our natural instinct is to resist.
So when we try to control others, even with the best of intentions, we're actually triggering their defenses.
Exactly. It's like a psychological boomerang. The harder we push, the further they pull away.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's where the beauty of let them comes in.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that change can only happen when the other person is ready for it.
So instead of trying to force our will on others, we need to create space for them to make their own choices.
Even if those choices don't align with our preferences.
It's a powerful shift in perspective, for sure. It requires a lot of trust and surrender, but it also feels so liberating. It frees us from the burden of trying to control outcomes that are ultimately outside of our control.
It is liberating, isn't it? And it opens the door to a much more collaborative and respectful approach to relationships.
And Mel doesn't just leave us hanging with this let them concept. She provides us with a practical framework for influencing change in a way that respects the other person's autonomy.
Oh, you mean the ABC loop?
Yes. I feel like that could be a really useful tool for navigating those tricky situations where you want to support someone without falling into that trap of control.
It is a very useful tool. And you know what? I think this might be a good place for us to pause for part 1 of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore.
There is. We will be back with part 2, where we'll delve deeper into the ABC loop, uncover the secrets to creating lasting friendships, and explore the power of let them in navigating the roller coaster of love and relationships. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're picking up right where we left off with Mel Robbins' the let them theory. Now, before the break, we were talking about that ABC loop and how it can help us influence change in a more respectful and empowering way.
Right. So the ABC loop gives us a more structured approach to navigating, those kind of delicate conversations, the ones where we want to support someone, but we don't want to fall into that trap of trying to control them.
I think we can all relate to that. So let's break it down step by step. What's the first move?
Step A is about acknowledging our own role in the dynamic, So we start by apologizing for any judgment or pressure we've exerted, and then we express genuine curiosity about the other person's perspective.
Okay, so it's about shifting from you need to change to I'm curious about your thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. It's about asking open-ended questions instead of just lecturing or offering unsolicited advice.
So for instance, instead of saying, you really need to get a handle on your finances, we might say something like, hey, I've noticed you've been stressed about money lately. What's been the most challenging part for you?
Perfect example. It just opens up the conversation without making the other person feel like they're being attacked or judged.
Okay, so we've apologized and we've asked some open-ended questions. What's next?
Step B is backing off.
Backing off.
Yeah, backing off and observing. So once we've, kind of opened that door for conversation, we need to resist the urge to jump in with solutions or try to control the outcome.
This is where let them really comes into play, right?
Absolutely. It's about giving the other person the space to, to process their thoughts and feelings, to make their own choices, and to own their journey.
Yeah, it's crucial for preventing that, what did you call it earlier, that psychological reactance. If we keep pushing, we're going to trigger their defenses, and then it's game over.
Yeah, exactly. I think of it like planting a seed and then just letting it grow. We can't force a plant to sprout. We can only provide the right conditions and then trust the natural process.
I like that analogy. Okay, so we've apologized, asked open-ended questions, backed off. What's the final step in the ABC loop?
Step C is all about celebrating progress.
Celebrating progress and modeling the change we want to see.
Right. So instead of focusing on what they're not doing, we shift our attention to acknowledging their efforts, and highlighting the positive steps they are taking.
So, for example, if our friend is, trying to eat healthier, we might say something like, hey, I was so impressed with how you made those healthy choices at the restaurant last night.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of modeling the change we want to see. If we want our partner to be tidier, maybe we can start by just being a little more mindful of our own clutter.
Actions speak louder than words, as they say. Okay, so the ABC loop seems like a really effective tool for promoting change in a respectful way. But what about those situations where someone's behavior is causing real harm, like addiction or abuse? Does the let them theory address those kinds of situations?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And Mel actually addresses that directly in chapter 16. It's called The More You Rescue, the More They Sink. And she really emphasizes that, let them is not about condoning harmful behavior or enabling destructive patterns.
So it's not about being passive or turning a blind eye to dangerous situations.
No, not at all. It's about recognizing that we can't force someone to change, even if their behavior is putting themselves or others at risk.
Yeah, that can be a tough pill to swallow. It's so hard when you love someone who's struggling, but I guess ultimately we can't control their choices.
Right. But that doesn't mean we're powerless. We can still set boundaries, communicate our concerns and seek professional help when necessary.
So let them in these situations. It's more about detaching with love.
Yeah, I think so. Creating distance, but, still holding space for the other person to hopefully find their own path.
It's a delicate balance for sure. But sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to prioritize our own safety and well-being. Okay, so we've talked about friendships, but I know a lot of people are curious about how let them applies to, romantic relationships. I mean, love can be a huge area where we struggle with control.
Oh, absolutely. And Mel dedicates several chapters to exploring those dynamics, like love, dating, commitment, all through the lens of let them.
So let's start with dating. It feels like such a minefield these days, especially with the rise of dating apps and the whole ever-changing landscape of modern romance.
Oh, yeah. Dating can be confusing and disheartening, and Mel offers some really insightful advice in Chapter 18. It's called Let Them Show You Who They Are.
Let them show you who they are.
Yeah.
I like that. What's the key takeaway from this chapter?
It's all about paying attention to people's actions, not just their words. Look beyond the initial charm or the curated online persona, and just really observe how they actually treat you.
So it's about being a detective, looking for clues that reveal their true character.
Exactly. And Mel encourages us to ask ourselves some key questions like, are they consistent? Do they make you a priority? Do their actions align with their words?
And if the answer is no, then it's time to let them go.
Yep. Don't waste your time and energy on someone who isn't fully invested in you. Mel has this great mantra. She says, if they like you, you'll know. If they don't, you'll be confused.
I love that. It cuts through all the overthinking and analyzing.
It does. And it encourages us to trust our gut.
And to pay attention to those red flags, which I think we all have a tendency to ignore.
Yeah, especially in those early stages. But ultimately, we deserve to be with someone who chooses us, enthusiastically, without hesitation and without confusion.
Absolutely. So let's say we've found that person,
Yeah.
the one who's consistent, who makes us a priority, whose actions align with their words. We're in a committed relationship. Does let them still apply at that point?
Oh, it absolutely does, because even the strongest, healthiest relationships will experience periods of conflict, disagreement, incompatibility. I mean, it's natural. It's part of life.
So it's not about finding the perfect partner. It's about learning how to navigate those inevitable bumps in the road.
Exactly. And Mel emphasizes that communication is key, but not just any kind of communication. It's about using the ABC loop to create that safe space for expressing our needs and really listening to our partner's perspective.
Okay, I'm trying to remember all the steps here. We apologize, ask open-ended questions, we back off, then we celebrate progress and model the change we want to see.
You got it. And it does seem like a lot to remember, but the beauty of the ABC loop is that it gives us, a framework, a way to approach conflict without triggering defensiveness.
Okay, so it helps us move towards collaboration rather than just butting heads.
Right.
And I bet that applies to all kinds of relationships, not just romantic ones.
Absolutely. It's a universal tool.
No, we can't really talk about relationships without touching on the topic of heartbreak. It's painful, but it's also a part of life. Does Mel offer any guidance on how to navigate heartbreak through the lens of let them?
Yeah, she does. In Chapter 20, it's called How Every Ending is a Beautiful Beginning. She dives deep into the process of, healing and moving on.
It's a reminder that heartbreak is normal, happens to all of us. And it doesn't mean we're not worthy of love.
Yeah. And she really encourages us to be gentle with ourselves during that time, to allow ourselves to feel the pain, to grieve the loss, and to seek support from our friends and family.
It sounds like this is where let them becomes like an act of self-compassion. Just allowing ourselves to feel the full range of emotions without judging ourselves.
It is, and it's about letting go of the past, releasing the other person with love, and just creating that space for ourselves to heal and to grow.
And she offers some really practical tips too, right? Like no contact, leaning on your support system.
Yeah, and she encourages us to kind of reframe the ending, not as a failure, but as an opportunity, a stepping stone to a future that's even better than we can imagine.
It's about recognizing that every ending is also a new beginning, a chance to rediscover ourselves.
To learn from our experiences.
To create a life that's even more aligned with, our true values.
And that's the essence of let them, isn't it? Letting go of what we can't control, surrendering to what is, and trusting that even in the midst of uncertainty, there's beauty and growth to be found.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are wrapping up our exploration of Mel Robbins' The Let Them theory. Now, in the first two parts, we really focused on how letting go can transform our relationships with others.
Yeah, friends, family, romantic partners, you name it.
But in this final part, I want to shift the focus inward a little bit. Because, as Mel points out, let them is only half the equation.
Right. In the last section of the book, she actually introduces this whole concept of a let me era.
Ooh, I like that. A let me era. Tell me more about that.
It's about, embracing our own individuality, our own unique path, and really creating a life that reflects who we truly are.
So giving ourselves permission to break free from all those expectations and shoulds that are holding us back.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we actually have a lot more control over our lives than we often realize.
Okay, I'm listening. How do we do that? How do we reclaim that control?
Well, it starts with making conscious choices, choosing how we respond to challenges, what values we prioritize, what steps we take to create a life that feels aligned with our deepest desires.
Okay, so it's not about controlling external circumstances. It's about mastering our internal world.
Exactly. It's a shift from a mindset of scarcity and limitation to one of abundance and possibility.
I love that. Mel uses a really great analogy in the book to illustrate this point. She compares life to the sky. It's constantly changing, unpredictable, sometimes stormy, sometimes serene, but we can't control the weather.
Right. We can't make the sunshine or the rain stop.
But we can choose how we respond to it. We can, grab an umbrella, put on a raincoat, or just dance in the puddles.
Exactly. And that's where our power lies. Not in trying to control the external world, but in mastering our inner world.
It makes me think of that famous quote, "Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference."
So true. Let them and let me are all about finding that balance.
Acceptance and action, surrender and empowerment.
Exactly.
And I think a big part of creating a let me era is, letting go of those self-limiting beliefs that hold us back.
Oh, those pesky limiting beliefs. They can be so insidious.
They really can. We all have them, right? Those voices in our heads that tell us we're not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough.
Yeah. But the good news is we don't have to listen to them. We can choose to challenge those negative thought patterns and replace them with, more empowering beliefs.
So it's about silencing the inner critic and amplifying our inner cheerleader.
I love that. It's about embracing our imperfections, celebrating our unique gifts, and giving ourselves permission to shine.
Without apology, without reservation.
Yes.
And, I think this whole let me philosophy feels like such a natural extension of let them. When we release the need to control others, it creates so much space for us to focus on our own growth and well-being.
It's like a ripple effect. When we learn to accept and embrace ourselves, it becomes easier to extend that same grace and compassion to the people around us.
We become less reactive, less judgmental, more present.
And ultimately, I think that's what the let them theory is all about, cultivating a sense of inner peace and freedom that then ripples outward into our relationships and the world around us.
It's been such a great conversation. I've learned so much from exploring this book with you.
Me too.
And I really hope our listeners feel inspired to, to embark on their own let me era, to create a life that feels truly authentic and fulfilling.
A life filled with purpose, joy, and connection.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the let them theory. Thank you for joining us.